Good evening, readers. This is Deepak from Amazon India. Welcome to the Facebook Live series of Amazon Books India. Today, we have with us Professor Kaushik Basu and Kavita Thaplayal. I welcome you both to this live session. Before the conversation starts, I would like to introduce our speakers. Kavita Thaplayal is a journalist and business anchor at CNBC Awards and is based in Mumbai. She's an expert in personal finance and helps people plan their money better. Kaushik Basu is a professor at Cornell University. He is currently serving as president of International Economic Association, a fellow of the Econometric Society. Basu has published widely in the area of development economics, industrial organization, game theory, and political economy. Early in his career, Basu was a professor at the Delhi School of Economics, where in 1992 he founded the Center for Development Economics and served as its first executive director. To viewers, I request you to keep posting your comments in the comment section, and our speakers will take them at the end of the session. Handing over the conversation to our speakers now.
Thank you so much, Deepak, and thank you so much, Dr. Basu, for removing time and joining us for this session. And it's all the more special to have you because, as you must obviously you must be knowing about it, that India is now marking 30 years of its economic reforms since the time we started economic reforms. So, who better than you to have and talk about it and the current situation of the economy? But that is going to be the later part of the discussion and the interaction. I'm going to start with the book, obviously, and the question that I'm going to ask is obviously very unexpected, but it is very relevant according to me as a reader. The book initially talks about a lot of policy making that you've done with the Indian government, but then there is one specific incident for which I want an answer from you, and this is about a Venice mugging incident. As a reader, it was very shocking for me and questioning also because I don't know how did you identify the thieves. So first, let's give a basic run through to the viewers as to what was the incident. And later on, I want to know as to how you identified the thieves and also the art of translating theory, because you've mentioned it being an integral part of your project or your assignment or whatever work you've done with the Indian government. So the theory, the art of translating and the entire theory through which you caught these thieves.
Kavita, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join you on this program. I'm glad you asked this question because this is one incident in life where I'm very proud of using theory in a very practical situation and solving potentially it was a pickpocket incident which I solved. So this thing which I begin my diary very early because it had just happened before I joined government. It was in Venice, in just outside St. Mark's Square. For people who know, it's a popular tourist place. My wife and I were buying ice cream. I was buying the ice cream at an ice cream cone store. And later on I realized that when you're buying ice cream, that's a very good time for pickpockets because one hand is handling the cone and you're busy talking and you're occupied when money can be pulled out of your pocket. And that's what happened. My wallet was gone when I had got the ice cream in my hand. Both my wife and I immediately started saying, what do we do? We were tourists in Venice. Her first reaction was, let's go and complain to the police. And I said, that'll be service to Venice. But right now I want to find my wallet if it's possible. There was a small group of people over there. And it is a little bit of staring at them and thinking, is anyone in the age group where pickpocketing would take place? When a couple, a husband and wife, I don't know, a partner, youngish, they walked away with their backpacks from the cluster. Okay. And I told my wife that this is the age group that fits with pickpocketing and they are walking away. Maybe they've got my wallet. Let us begin to follow them. And then I did one deduction. They will feel very uncomfortable that we are walking behind them. And they will want to know if I'm trying to track them and they will turn back and see. They did something. They stopped at a store window, looked at the window and then turned back and went past us. And I at that point deduced they were checking if we are following them or just going in that direction. So I turned around and started following them. And I told my wife, I'm sure they've taken it because they are trying to shake us off from being behind them. And my wife is braver than I am. I was doing the deduction, she's braver. She went and immediately stopped them and said that my husband has lost his wallet. Have you all seen anyone taking it? To which the man pulled his own pocket inside out and said, check if I've taken it.
Okay.
Then I spoke to my wife in Bengali and I said, for sure he's taken it, because you don't say, check if I've taken it when you're asking for a wallet. So I said that I want to check your backpack. He put it down and his partner was walking away. And I shouted to my wife and said, don't let her go away because she may have my wallet.
Oh.
And it turned out, when I made him sit down, open his backpack, he realized that he'll be caught. So he said, keep quiet. And he called his girlfriend. She came over. He told her something. She took the wallet out from her pack.
Okay.
And gave it to us. That's the incident. And this was just reasoning about how they are thinking. And I believe actually in life, we use reasoning too little for our own selves, reasoning inside our own head. And in my diary, in many places, I talk about reasoning and game theory as almost being a self-help discipline. It helps you lead a better life. That was the story.
So how did you apply this in the world of economics and then later on your period with the government?
Yeah, world of economics, there are many areas of application. I'll tell you one area where this is big, since you have an interest in finance. Auction. How you design an auction. How you raise prices, at which point you cut off. The design of auction has been done by game theorists very well. So this is almost like building a bridge. I mean, here economics comes in like engineering. And I do feel good that when I was in government, for the 3G spectrum, which initially the government was thinking we will just value it and then sell it. I kept pushing that we should design an auction and do it. And actually the auction turned out to be, in terms of raising money, a phenomenal success, because auction is one area where game theory can be used. And there are other areas as well. I might later tell you about inflation control, where you can use a little bit of game theory.
I have a question for you, and definitely I'm going to take up this explanation later on. But then let's go back to the day when you got a call from the PMO office for the job. I remember you writing in your book that you were obviously getting ready to leave the country, and this call came to you, and you mentioned an interest to meet the Prime Minister in person to know what exactly he wants from you. So I want to know, what was it that he told you, and why was it so convincing for you to join the government and work for the betterment of the country?
Yeah. So Kavita, just to bring the reader up on the background, I was that time chairman of the Department of Economics at Cornell, doing my summer, which I usually do in India, in Delhi. And then the day before my departure, I suddenly, completely unexpected, get a call from the Prime Minister's office. And the caller very quickly got to the point. This was Vinnie Mahajan, I remember. She said that, Professor Basu, the Prime Minister wants to know if you will consider being the chief economic advisor to his government. That was the question, to which I said, this is such a big question. I mean, I'm a professor, I do research, I do teaching, that I will need to talk to the Prime Minister directly for me to make up my mind. She called back in 10 minutes. I told her that, but tomorrow I'm going back to America.
Right.
She called back in 10 minutes saying that, can you come tomorrow? Maybe on your way to the airport, pack your bags, come and talk to the Prime Minister. So I went to see Dr. Manmohan Singh the following day, which was the eve of my departure, literally having packed up my bags, had a long conversation. And I was excited. The job of a chief economic advisor for India is a huge thing. Not the career trajectory for me. I am a researcher, I am a teacher, but it was exciting to know that I was being considered. But the conversation was very important because the Prime Minister assured me that he was looking for ideas to be brought to the table for India, for India's reform. He reminded me that this is a job he himself had once done. And he said he wanted this role to be an important role. And I felt this was a very, very genuine request, that it would not just be a political position where I will sit there and do my usual stuff.
True.
And so I virtually said yes. I didn't give a completely confirmed yes. I went back, I thought a little bit and wrote back. And then after a few months, the formal offer came and my life's trajectory changed completely, dramatically.
But then how do you take this change? Because in the book you mentioned your first love is obviously papers and books. Okay, at that time, what was your perception on politicians before joining the government, and once you joined them and you started working with them? Also, because you have an international exposure of working with world leaders, how different are Indian politicians?
Yeah. One thing is, I have to say, there was no big revelation after I joined government, because I think I'm smart enough to more or less know what politicians are like. I knew that in advance. I came in with that. Few things which confirmed my view, and this I do want to say for the reader, it's important. Most people think very ill of politicians. They're an awful bunch.
Exactly, yeah.
Most people do. And many of them are exactly that. But what does escape people is there are very often some politicians who are remarkable, outstanding. For them, the ambition is to get the country forward, but a political job is a very difficult job. You're managing 1,000 different pressures and complications, so despite your best intentions, that intention may not come out. The other thing was about the top bureaucracy. The IAS, Indian Economic Service, Foreign Service, I was, of course, continuously interacting with them. There also, there are for people a bit of a surprise. Lots of people think that corruption is rampant and everywhere. There is a lot of corruption, but whole lot of people are not corrupt. Whole lot of bureaucrats are doing a job which they want to carry out for the sake of the country. And another thing which I do mention in my diary, in my nearly 3 years, never saw any corrupt act being done in my presence. Two reasons for that. One is corruption is not as rampant as people think. Corruption is there, no doubt, and we should be upset about it, not as rampant. Number two, the corrupt people know that I was an outsider. So in my presence, of course, they would not reveal any of their hands. So, yeah.
No, but then going forward, you were obviously apprehensive when you were joining, and later on, you got into the rhythm and in the flow of the government infrastructure and the work culture, basically. But coming from a background where you work as a professor and you are all surrounded by research papers, how difficult or easy was for you to put out your ideas on anything?
Yeah. So there was some difficulty, and in my initial sort of weeks and months, I was not liking my job at all. My feeling was, if I could really stop it and just go back to my life of like, I enjoy lecturing, teaching, go back to all that, I would happily do it. But, it would cause great embarrassment to the government that someone comes as chief economic advisor and in 2 months goes away. So I could not go away. I stayed on. Then the job grew on me because you're taking major decisions.
But what was the initial discomfort?
The initial discomfort is it's a very different work culture. It was mainly that. I'm used to a very flat world, an academic world. Even the Delhi School of Economics in India, I have to say, Indian top universities, Delhi School of Economics, JNU, the top sort of places, very flat culture. There is no hierarchy. There is no bowing and scraping in the presence of anyone. In politics and government, there is a hierarchy, and I understand you can't run government without a hierarchy. But for me, that culture was very difficult. I found it difficult adjusting. But that was the sort of the cultural style, and I got gradually used to that. But what got me excited was scope for ideas being put on the table. And I can tell you one without going into details, which I discuss over there. Very soon after I joined, the Prime Minister called a meeting. Inflation, if you remember, was very high. I joined government with inflation very high. I'm saying it's very high, but we have to remember that the current wholesale price inflation is bigger than what was taking place then. It is the biggest in the last 30 years. But our time inflation was quite high, and that was on everyone's mind. And one of the first meetings with the Prime Minister and a couple of other people, top bureaucrats, 6, 7 of us, I gave a technical suggestion about how to release food to dampen the food price increase a strategy which was actually worked out more than 100 years ago by a mathematical economist or a mathematician, the technology of releasing goods. And that was put into effect. So there were those moments when you feel that, ideas which can make a difference to people's lives, some of these ideas are being accepted. There were many that were not accepted, but many were accepted. And there was a great satisfaction in doing this.
This was my other question as to how accepting were you and your ideas, because the kind of background you come from, were politicians really open to the kind of suggestions and ideas and solutions that you had to offer?
It's a mixed bag. I mean, many of the ideas I could not really get my way, which would occasionally frustrate me. But then again, I would pause and tell myself, a prime minister or a finance minister is getting hundreds of ideas pouring in. So it's foolish of me to think that all my ideas will be accepted. There's politics, there is jockeying. But there were important ideas, which I think made a big difference to India's economy. You have to remember that was a period where inflation was high, but growth was phenomenal, absolutely. And the growth had started well before I joined government. In fact, from about 2003, India's growth was really picking up. By 2005, it was surging ahead, and I came in the middle of that. Some of that after, for instance, the 2008 financial crisis, the global crisis, the Lehman collapse. India, it's worth remembering, India's growth dropped for 1 year and dropped to 6.7%. Next year, it was back at 8.6%. So it really surged back again after that one shock. A lot of it had to do with very good curation of policy that was taking place. Some of it I was playing a role, but a lot of it is a big mechanism. Lots of people are giving ideas, but ideas were beginning to play some role, and which was causing India to be a vibrant economy.
So now, since we are completing 30 years of economic reforms, how do you see our journey and what is the road ahead? What are the challenges that you see right now?
Kavita, it is a mixed feeling for me because in terms of fundamental strengths, which can get a country going forward, India has many. One is India has a higher education system, which is very good. It is true, India's basic education, not everyone is still covered. By now, we should be 100% literacy, but we are nowhere near there. So there are lots of lack over there. But as soon as you're going to college and getting education, it's a very good quality education. And that's the reason why Indians who get that are in the sort of global best group of people thinking, talking of ideas. That's a huge asset. India has certain industries where India is a forerunner in the world. And these are industries which are very important industries today. Information technology, software, basically the IT sector, starting from the days of Wipro, Infosys, the Tata Group, India became a global leader. Pharmaceutical industry, very, very important. India is in the lead. So India has lots of strengths, which makes me feel good about India. Right. What does worry me, frankly, is that not just right now, India's economy is in complete doldrums, doing very badly.
Right.
But right now, you can't blame anyone. It is a very special situation with the COVID, and countries are trying different policies. Some are working, some are not working. Very difficult time. I do think India made a couple of mistakes, obvious mistakes, but you can't blame anyone. But India's growth has been dropping from 2016. From 2016, her saal growth has been less than the previous year. 4 years of growth dropping has not happened before. That worries me. And I feel the reason why that is happening is policy mistakes are taking place and also trust in one another. Do people trust each other? That is typically not treated as a topic of economics, but there are important writings. Most important, I must tell your readers, Francis Fukuyama's book called Trust. The book is called Trust. It is about whether people trust one another. And Fukuyama is showing that historically, countries which develop trust among its people have faster growth. And I believe that there is a trust deficiency also in India. We've become very polarized. I belong to this group, you belong to this group, which was beginning to improve in India. India was really, the trajectory of India was like a modern, developed, society, we backtracked from that, and that does worry me. So it's a mixed bag. I mean, strong fundamentals, backtracking over about 4 years, 5 years from 2016. So I'm left with somewhat of a confused state about where we may end up.
Mm-hmm. Since you talk about policy making being an integral part of your growth, and which we've not taken very seriously or has gone well, एक आम आदमी के लिए, for viewers जो अभी आपको देख रहे हैं, how do you want to make them understand policy making क्या होती है और क्यों इतनी जरूरी है?
जरूर, because at one level, most people think that policy making is क्या हमारा common sense है, I can make policy. Truth is, in some domains, common sense is all we have. Economics has no advice. But there are some areas where economics plays crucial role. How you design something. एक तो example which I gave you earlier, अगर auction करना है any commodity, and auction is anything that you're trying to sell. How you sell, it can be designed. Inflation, when inflation is taking place, part of inflation policy is intuition, guesswork. Part of inflation policy can be very well defined and designed and done. I can give you examples, but maybe I should not get into details of that kind. But there are those kinds of areas where if you do the law pertaining to the economy right, if you do the food grain release, how you release the food grain onto the market to dampen price increase, can be done very, very scientifically. And this is not just common sense. This is a lot of knowledge of economics is needed. Not enough is being used, worries me.
एक आम आदमी के नजरिए से अगर हम देखें तो आपने काफी बखूबी तो समझाया ही है अबाउट पॉलिसी मेकिंग, बट व्हेन यू आर इनटू द गवर्नमेंट, आई एम श्योर बहुत सारे चैलेंजेस होंगे जो आपको फेस करने पड़े होंगे. बहुत सारी बातें तो आपने अपनी बुक में ही यहाँ पर लिखी हैं, बट टू फोकस ऑन द ह्यूमर एस्पेक्ट ऑफ इट, व्हिच आई थिंक यू शुड रियली नरेट दिस टू द व्यूअर्स आल्सो. इट टॉक्स अबाउट द आर्ट ऑफ मास्टरिंग एन एक्सक्लूसिव आर्ट ऑफ बीइंग इन अ मीटिंग वेयर यू हैव नो आइडिया अबाउट व्हाट द मीटिंग इज. क्या ऐसा भी हुआ था? अब होता है कि नहीं होता हमें नहीं पता, लेकिन ऐसा आपके साथ क्या हुआ ये बताइए.
Yeah, those were some of the funnier incidents in life, and it was new. So there were situations.
Because I remember it happened in the initial stages when you had just joined. Okay.
Yeah. So, एक incident which is there in my book is you must be referring to that. It was a very busy day. Subah se I was going from one meeting to another, and then my personal secretary came and said, "You have to go to a meeting," and I went thinking that उस meeting में मैं तो चुपचाप बैठा रहूंगा in one corner without saying anything.
But you were chairing it.
I entered the room and realized I'm chairing it because everyone jumped up. When people get up when you enter, you know you're chairing. So I said, "Fas gaya. I'm chairing a meeting. I don't know what the meeting was about." So I sat there, and the meeting was just a technical discussion about GBS. GBS, kya cheez hai? I didn't know. And the meeting started, and I was saying, "Let someone tell me what GBS is," but no one did. Full meeting took place on GBS. Then I learned GBS is gross budgetary support, the money that is given by the finance ministry to the planning commission for planning related expenditure. Very important topic. But these were incidents which happened in the beginning, which were very funny for me. So I wrote down in my diary about my new life and how things were happening, funny things were happening.
For a reader, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Ji. Also, politicians के लिए भी आपने कहा है कि they have the skill of talking about anything and everything without knowing what they are talking about and without even feeling the need to understand it. So, ये कब हुआ?
This was actually throughout, I have to say, and this is worldwide, because I come from a life and I do economics, economic theory. I like everything to be as precise and clear as you can make it. Life is very often not precise. You can do nothing. But I try to say things as clearly as possible. Whereas when I joined government, I realized, and then I saw this is, of course, a worldwide phenomenon. Politicians will speak fluently, so you feel it is a lot of information you're getting. But when you stop and say exactly what was the essence being delivered, and then you realize, I don't know what the content is. And then you realize political speech is most of the time trying to win over people by sounding very nice with very little content, whereas research and lecturing in technical subject is trying to be as clear as possible. Even a child should understand what you're trying to say. Politics is the opposite.
Acha, because you mentioned political speeches, so I remember you liking Nitish Kumar and Narendra Modi at that time when आपने उनकी पहली बार जब speech सुनी थी. क्या अच्छा लगा आपको दोनों में?
With Nitish Kumar, I had actually several meetings, and actually my first meeting with him was before I joined government.
Oh.
And the interest he took, I was just impressed by his interest on how to measure poverty, how to curb poverty increase. He took an interest, and without any of the pomposity of a politician, he took that interest. So that was my impression with him. After that, I met him a few times. He's a very good orator as well. I like that. With Prime Minister Modi, it was what I refer to in my book was a one-on-one meeting. Us waqt, I was the chief economist of the World Bank. I came to India and I had this meeting with him.
That was the first one-on-one meeting. उससे पहले as a chief minister भी आप उनसे मिले थे?
नहीं, कभी नहीं. That was my first meeting. After that, I met him once, but that was the first meeting that took place.
Okay.
I had not met him. And that meeting, I went in with skepticism because for me, I have political differences. I want India to be secular, including everyone. Everyone should be a part of the country. So I had political differences. I went in with that, with my skepticism that there'll be political difference. But it was, I don't know, 35, 40 minutes in my diary I've mentioned. It was a meeting mainly about India's economy. And he listened very carefully. And I was doing most of the talking because I was saying, Prime Minister, I've been chief economic advisor and I'm the chief economist of the World Bank. I want to tell you a few things where India has to do this right about international trade, investment, etc. And I was actually very pleased that he listened so carefully. So I came out feeling good. After that, India's economy is done very badly. So in the end, I'm disappointed. But after that meeting, I did come out feeling, given my skepticism, and the skepticism is there still, but I felt good about the meeting. Yeah.
So while working in the government, मुझे ये बात बताइए कि does political leaning or ideologies really matter for anyone working as an economist?
It does matter. People have ideologies, and that shows up. So you do get a sense of that. I have to say I like to think of myself as very open-minded. I can take different kinds of viewpoints. My own sympathy is what will broadly be called the left ideology in the following sense. I should clarify. I believe that the world, India, needs much greater equality. There's too much inequality. So our aim should not be just growth, but importantly, it has to be curbing inequality. Better distribution of income and welfare, I think, is important. At the same time, what kinds of policies you undertake to achieve that greater equality, there I think you have to be hard-headed. Just by being good and trying to do things, you'll mess things up. In reality is very complex. I'll give you one more example, which in India is an important topic: corruption. Corruption, we all get very angry. I get very angry when someone asks me for a bribe. It's infuriating. But working in government, I realized that if you are just angry about corruption and say that, is waqt I want corruption to be put to an end, you will make big policy mistakes which will hurt the economy for the following reason. Corrupt action takes place side by side with non-corrupt action, legitimate action. They are all happening in the economy. You know, in the world of finance, which you work on, Kavita, that there are people who are doing things legally, there are people who are doing things illegally. If government comes in and without differentiating too much tries to stop it all, it is like when you're doing a surgery on the human body, you have to take a bad tumor out. You have to do it very carefully not to damage the healthy tissues and just take the bad tumor out. If you damage it all, you've done more hurt than good. This is what people don't realize about corruption control. Despite the best intentions, you have to do it very carefully. And there's a lot of design involved in how you weed corruption out of a society. But if you just do it very, very in an overarching way without differentiation, like I do believe that demonetization was a disastrous policy. It was trying to get rid of corruption, but in a manner where you're damaging the full economy to take corruption out. In the end, corruption does not drop, but the economy gets damaged. So that is the kind of area where you have to bring in expertise, have to do a lot of design, and go in and intervene with policy.
इसके साथ ही डॉक्टर बसु एक आम सवाल जो कि मेरे ख्याल से एक आम आदमी के दिमाग में भी आता है कि सरकारें जो होती हैं या तो वो अमीरों की होती हैं या तो वो गरीबों की होती हैं। मिडिल क्लास जो कि एक सबसे बड़ा तबका है जो रिप्रेजेंट करता है आपके देश को, उसके बारे में नहीं सोचा जाता या कम सोचा जाता है। सो जब आप थे गवर्नमेंट में तब कितना फोकस दिया जाता था इस कंसर्न पर?
Quite a bit, Kavita, but फिर भी in all governments there is a tendency towards cronyism. There are a few people who become your favorites, and even my time I would worry that there are big businesses which try to get special favor and get connected. But I feel that has gone much worse, cronyism. So cronyism, when 3-4 businesses begin to influence government, that is crony capitalism, and India has a big risk of crony capitalism. That risk was always there. It is not new, but I think we are beginning to get into that. And that time there was some comfort for me because there were occasions when among top bureaucrats and politicians, a few politicians, not all, I could sit in a meeting where I felt these politicians are sensitive to the risk of crony capitalism, that big businesses should not capture. Some of that happens, but they are aware. When the top people are aware, I've had meetings with Dr. Manmohan Singh also, where I was clear that he's aware of this problem. Then you feel a bit hopeful that once you have that awareness, you will keep that in checks and balances. And what happens is what you first said, that the middle classes, the poor people get left out. Because once crony capitalism proper starts, your focus is just on the big business. You're designing policy, no attention to what happens to ordinary workers, ordinary farmers. Your attention is entirely on the few big businesses and what happens to them. So this is something that countries have to learn to guard against at all times and take precautions against that.
So considering the current scenario of the pandemic, और जैसा कि आपने भी खुद कहा कि हमारी ग्रोथ अब काफी पीछे जा चुकी है अगर हम ग्लोबल ग्रोथ मैप को देखें. So now thinking about this, obviously India is a country which is very layered. आपके पास एक हार्ड हिटिंग पॉलिसी नहीं हो सकती है. तो इस वक्त अगर मैं आपसे कुछ सोल्यूशन मांगू तो क्या वो मुमकिन है? Do you really see a policy making stand that can be taken right now in this situation?
I think actually many policy-making stands can be taken because India's growth is now doing so poorly. We should not be in this state. Poverty is increasing. World Bank has just put out data. World Bank put out data actually some months ago that in the world, whole world, number of people living below the poverty line, which is extreme poverty. I mean, the sort of people you're seeing really out there completely flat out has increased during the pandemic. No surprise, worldwide. But of the increase in people who are below the poverty line, 60% of them are in South Asia. So the increase in poverty is disproportionately in South Asia, not in Africa, but in South Asia. And this was all before the second wave in India. So I feel India's poor and the lower middle class are suffering in a very, very big way. Wherever in countries we have data, even in the United States, the bottom segment is suffering. But I think in India, where the country is not a rich country like an advanced economy, the poor are suffering in a very big way. So a lot of the attention really ought to go over there to what can you do, how can you intervene to improve this? And this can be done in ways which can have an effect. Like when you're doing a fiscal injection, you're spending more money in the country to boost demand. This is what economists will tell you. During a recession, you do that. Now, India's current recession is not like a standard recession, economic recession. This is a COVID recession. This is a pandemic recession. When you get that, some sectors, there is a shortage of supply. Supplies don't come. Some sectors, there's a shortage of demand. It can be different. For instance, in healthcare, there's an excess demand. People want healthcare, but they are not getting it. In hotels and airline flights, there's an excess supply. People are not doing. In that case, your injection into the economy has to be inject demand in one sector, not in the other sector. So just injecting demand is not good enough. You have to plan that out very carefully. Not enough of that is happening now. So those are the things which are dampening India's growth and hurting India's poor. If we begin to correct that very rapidly, because the situation is very difficult, I feel India can pull out of this very difficult situation.
चलिए वापस आते हैं बुक पर और एक बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग चीज आपने बुक में लिखी है कि दरवाजे पर नॉक करना काफी इम्पोलाइट माना जाता था. इनफैक्ट हम देखते हैं पॉलिसी मेकिंग और डिसीजन जो होते हैं रिफॉर्म को लेकर अमूमन इन गवर्नमेंट वो डिले होते रहते हैं, बट यहाँ पर 15 सेकंड मेरे ख्याल से बचा लिया जाता है अगर आप दरवाजे पे नॉक ना करें. तो ये आपको ऑब्जर्वेशन कहाँ से आया?
So this was, I realized soon in Government of India, those who have the right to go into a certain room, at least that was the case in Finance Ministry, they did not knock. So once there was something very urgent, I ran up to the Finance Minister's office and Pranab Mukherjee, Finance Minister there. I was about to knock when the person at the door said, "Yeah, aap kya kar rahe hain?" About to knock. So I said, "I need to talk to the Finance Minister just now, something urgent." She said, "Tab andar chale jaiye, knock karne ka kya zarurat hai?" Then I realized that the culture is then you just fling open the door and you go in and with your, and then later on I said, initially it took me a bit of time to adjust because in the West, before you enter anyone's room in America, if the door is shut, you always knock. In India, if you have the right to go in, you just go right in. And I said, in the end, I decided that the Indian culture in this is better because America mein 15 second waste ho jata. You knock and the person says, "Come in," and then you open. India mein you just bust open the door and you go in. So 15 second is getting saved. So the Indian norm was better. Ministry of Finance norm was better.
अच्छा, किताब में एक और चीज मैंने नोट की है. You've traveled so much. So, by the way, all those people who really want places for their bucket list should also read this book because Dr. Basu ने इतनी सारी जगह यहाँ पर देखी है और ताजुब की बात ये है सर that there's not a single place that you would write के ठीक ठाक लगी. आपको सभी जगह बहुत खूबसूरत लगी हैं और आपने इतनी खूबसूरती से इतने डिस्क्रिप्टिव तरीके से उन्हें समझाया है that the person reading would really want to go and visit that place. आपकी फेवरेट डेस्टिनेशन कौन सी रही है? वर्क वाइज गए हो या इवन जनरली?
Very difficult to say. I like new places. I like travel, even hot places. And for me, it is not the museums and palaces. I like to just go to a place and walk in the city, walk in the town, walk in the villages. So lots of very lovely experiences in different places of the. Are you asking about the world in general?
Yeah, world in general.
I can tell you when I was at the World Bank, northern Ethiopia. Was a fascinating trip for me, where you are getting a lot of the trouble right now, the Tigray problem, which is hitting us. I spent a couple of days in northern Ethiopia with the people over there, with the farmers over there. Absolutely fascinating experience. And early religion, which was quite interesting. Christianity came there very early. Before most of Europe, it had come there. But meeting some of these Christian monks over there in northern Ethiopia, so not sort of integrated with the rest of the modern world, they were saying that there were also ancient Hindu influences over there. So it was very fascinating that getting a glimpse of early history in a place like that. Then there were other places in China, in Changsha, Hunan province, Changsha, Mao Zedong's birthplace. Again, fascinating meeting, because when you go to Beijing and Shanghai, it is like anywhere in the world. You're meeting with bureaucrats who are interacting with the whole world. But again, in these small places, you begin to meet people who talk differently, give out some secrets, which in big cities, people are sophisticated, they won't give out. But in small places, they speak freely. So lovely experiences just all over the world. I'll tell you one more, which was in Samoa, tiny island over there.
I have noted that place down. Yes.
It's a lovely, spectacular island. And at the end of it, last day, my World Bank meetings took place with the Prime Minister, with the Central Bank Governor. Then I said, I want to find out if there are Indians on this island, tiny island. I would like to meet them. I was told there are 2 Indians. One is a Bengali a teacher in a school. I was keen, but last evening I couldn't find him. And they said there's another Maharashtrian a person who runs a restaurant in this little town. I went there at night. Next morning I was leaving, went and met this person who runs the restaurant, young boy who had come from Bombay to Samoa and started this restaurant. Lovely conversation, just discovering his world, how he adjusted to this new world, etc. I'm just very fortunate about the places I've gone and people I've met.
Totally. And in fact, I'm envious of that also. But yeah, I've noted down all the places. Now, having said that, I want to talk about one of the highlights of the book, your meeting with former President Obama. So सबसे पहले तो आप बताएं ऑडियंस को कि वो मीटिंग क्या थी, और then later on I'll follow up with my questions.
So this was, I met Obama twice. Once was when I was chief economic advisor in India. President Obama came to visit Manmohan Singh, that time the Indian Prime Minister. I had met him very briefly. That was a group meeting, had some conversation. The next one was in January 2015, when I suddenly got a call. I was in my World Bank office. A person called me from the office from the White House, saying, very polite request, will you be able to spare a little bit of time to come and meet President Obama? So I said, this will be very exciting for me, so I will go for sure. So this was just before Obama's visit to India in January 2015. He was meeting a small group of people, 4 or 5 of us, to get some ideas about India, the political economy of India and United States, etc. So invited me. So I remember that day I walked from my World Bank office, walked down Pennsylvania Avenue. It's about a 15-minute walk, reached the White House, and then met with President Obama. So there was a lot of discussion. With me, the discussion was primarily on political economy. And I do believe that India and the US both have an interest in the other economic interest. We, of course, have to be very careful, mind your own national interest will, of course, come first for each nation, keeping that in mind. And, Kavita, the old United States, I would not really think in terms of engaging. The Nixon period, when it was very sort of instinctively anti-Indian, anti-third world. But President Obama, all the vibes were that he was well-meaning about the rest of the world. So I went very happily. And I believe the scope, India can do better, even United States can do better by doing this relationship right between India and the US, scope for trade, scope for business, scope for political interaction. And I also wanted to stress the importance of soft power, which United States people forget. They talk of, see, United States as military and trade and business, not realizing that I feel one of the main reasons why United States is so successful is its higher education, its research, its open atmosphere. So the soft power of research, culture, and I'm not just talking of mathematics and economics and physics, but literature, arts, America nurtures it. And I told President Obama that, this is what I aspire for India, that India's soft power should grow, because in the end, soft power is more important than hard power. So I know it was a discussion which just went off very, very well with him. And that was it. I mean, he was just getting a flavor of the country during this meeting.
Okay, now talking about your work with Dr. Manmohan Singh, how do you see him as a person, politician, and economist?
Yeah, actually, remarkably as a person, as a politician, I have to clarify, which comes out in my diary. He's not a typical politician. Most politicians, after you've done politics for a long time, that becomes your obsession. And I won't name anyone, but on the side I was working, on the opposition side, most of the time in government, you go and meet a politician. When it's a small meeting, the conversation just becomes on politics. This is what you have to do. That is what you have to do. With Dr. Manmohan Singh, and I did become very, very impressed by that his interest was to get India moving forward. And all my meetings every time would be that, how do we do this better? How do we do the G20 engagement better so that it helps India move forward? How do we get the growth up? I remember after the recession, I joined India during the Great Recession in the West, and India's economy was badly affected. And as I said, it was 1 year of bad effect on India. Next year, India was back again at 8.6, 8.7%.
Right. Yeah.
All that was actually a great interest of his. And also another thing I got to appreciate, that he's innately a modest person, which politicians typically are not. And what I appreciated was, it needs a lot of courage to be modest.
Okay.
Contrary to what people say, it is very easy to be immodest, but it needs a lot of courage to continue to be modest when you're prime minister. And I think he was a very courageous person, because he was insistent on his modesty, not excessive modesty, but that I don't want to promote myself. And I had lots of incidences where I could see he was not into promoting himself. So I feel actually he was an extremely good prime minister in terms of the sort of work that was happening. And this is something which I feel will be appreciated in retrospect. And already you can see it in the numbers, but will be appreciated in retrospect.
Okay, so almost the last leg of the discussion. I wanted to ask you one question, but now I'm going to rope in one more question in that. What is your message to the youth of this country now, considering the pandemic and the kind of situation we are into economically and otherwise also? And the next question to you would be, what is your next book? Are you planning to write? Are you thinking of something? So first, let's take the youth question.
The youth question, I mean, there's, what do I say? I mean, it's the usual thing that people will say, usual thing our parents' generation would tell us when we were young. You put your self-interest is natural. We have our interest, we are interested in our family and immediate people. But through life, keep a broader interest. Also, qualities like personal qualities like honesty, integrity, I'm not using them in a goody-goody sense. I feel these are very important qualities in human beings. And I feel societies which nurture this, they do well. And then another thing I'll tell you, which is my own philosophical attitude, is that your concern should be for any human being suffering anywhere, not just for your co-religionists or your co-nationality, co-caste. No. Any human being suffering is a human being you should be concerned about. There are times, and this is the reason why I worked in India, I'm not able to help someone far away. Whereas I felt in India, I can contribute to that. That's why I was working for India's improvement. But we must have this broader sense of identity with the world and with anyone suffering. And I would love the youth to develop that. And another thing, you're giving me a chance to talk to the youth, so I'm taking this up.
Sure.
To be able to think and reason. Don't give in to emotions. Don't give in to politicians telling you this is the way you go. No matter how much you like politicians, pause always. No matter how much you like any leader, pause always, think for yourself. Whether it be a religious leader, whether it be a political leader, you think for yourself. We all have morals in our society, and I feel one damage that economics has done, we keep talking about the profit motive, the investment motive. We don't talk about the importance of integrity, honesty. And I feel economies also in the end do better if people have these qualities. And I would love the youth to nurture this, go forward and discover the world of ideas. It's a very, very exciting world.
Okay, amazing.
What was your second question?
The second question was, when is your next book coming, or what is it on?
Yeah, I don't know. I have been thinking in terms of, while writing this book, Kavita, there are parts of it where I'm occasionally reflecting about handling life, handling situations. And I was thinking it will be great fun to write a book which is where you're learning game theory, but learning game theory with, over here, a little bit of a selfish interest to use it better in life. A lot of people, I feel, for instance, that people who suffer from depression, some of the depression is clinical. You need counseling, you need medicine. But I also feel that very often people get confused, suffer from depression, because they don't think clearly enough. If you stop and say, I have to talk to myself very clearly. So conversations inside your own head. So I feel like blending game theory with conversations in your head, how you can use it in life, is roughly what I'm planning to do. But I plan 10 books and I end up writing one. So this is one of my plans. I don't know if it will happen.
We will still wait for it. I think we have some questions coming up. So what are you reading this week is one question asked.
Yeah. Right now, on what I've actually just finished reading after a long time, I read fiction, was Jhumpa Lahiri's Whereabouts, which actually had me just fascinated. But what I'm right now reading, if I have it over here, I could show you, but no. It is a book which combines moral philosophy with game theory. It's written by a philosopher, Peter van der Graaf, which is the combination of looking at ancient philosophy. So he's talking of from the Greeks to David Hume and others, and blending it with modern game theory with John Nash, and trying to get some sense of these early writings. And this actually does interest me a lot. So right now, actually, the book that I'm immersed in is that one. And I've got, my room is full of the books which I haven't read, which I plan to read. So I don't know which ones I'll get to.
One book which you think is like an all-time recommendation right now?
Well, one book is difficult to pick, but I'll tell you, I have, for instance, one reason which also provoked me into keeping a diary is I find people's diaries or autobiographical writings are of very deep influence for me, because very often they can be extremely honest statements of oneself. So I can give you one or two which have been very important for me. Gandhi writing about himself, Mahatma Gandhi about himself, Swami Vivekananda, his diary to me is fascinating because you're seeing his human side, very interesting things. Rousseau, the philosopher, his diary, and the diary where Rousseau is so honest that he's saying things about himself which makes you feel awful, but then you realize it's this person's honesty that he's giving out his hand. And one more, which is the shortest autobiography that I've read, which is absolutely a delight, is David Hume, the philosopher. 24-page autobiography. So if from my sort of readings of the past, I'm making a recommendation, it's these small diaries and autobiographical books. I find them fascinating. So I would recommend those to your.
And is this what motivated you to write this book also?
Sorry, which one? This?
Yeah, all the autobiographies that you've mentioned just now, did they inspire you to write the Policymakers Journal?
It is possible. There was a little bit of that. I didn't do it consciously. The Policymakers Journal, really, immediately after I joined government, it was such a confusing time for me. It was having a calming effect on me every night after the very busy day to write down some of these thoughts. But I suppose I had been so impressed by some of these honest diaries, from Gandhi to David Hume to Rousseau to Bertrand Russell, that must have influenced me, and I started keeping the diary, and in the end I enjoyed sort of the recording of that. And I also have a very bad memory for dates, so the diary is very useful to me. I can quickly check up what happened on which day.
Okay, next question is, which leader would you say amongst all those you've interacted with was the most charismatic? Which young leader did you see the most potential to do great things in the future? Abhay Singh's question.
Yeah, Abhay, I don't know. I mean, there were people I was meeting all over, and there were individuals who I just liked their dignity, their carriage, etc. President Obama, I have to say, was one of those. I felt that there was something natural. I already said that with Dr. Manmohan Singh, but that my book is full of that, my accounts of that. So that's really, I can pin down Angela Merkel, whom actually I never interacted with directly. But it was very close. I mean, with her advisors, with the ambassador, etc. Again, my sense was I would have policy disagreements with her, but broadly in terms of orientation and attitude, I would like that. Then I've had some meetings with prime ministers and presidents. One which was a fascinating meeting was, he's now very controversial character, is Daniel Ortega, the president of Nicaragua. He had led a revolution when I was a student. So I was very keen to meet him, the person who had led the revolution against the autocratic dictator of Nicaragua, Somoza. And they had overthrown Somoza's regime. So I was very keen to meet him. So these were just fascinating meetings with people where part of it was to get ideas and discuss, but part of it is also I was observing them, trying to figure out what kind of a personality are they. So, yeah.
Agla sawal, I think next question is, who's your favorite author and why? I think it's difficult for you to point out one.
Yeah, I'm a disproportionately reader of non-fiction, also plays. I love to read plays. So I can tell you one playwright whom I've read virtually everything he writes is Tom Stoppard. Stoppard, the playwright, the British playwright, originally from Czechoslovakia, and early years grew up in India. As a child, he was in India. Stoppard's plays, the theater I love. If I have to name one, maybe the big influence, because Stoppard combines a philosophical sense with very great humor. So his plays are hilarious, very funny, but most of the jokes are laced with some very important philosophical ideas over there. So I just enjoy reading Stoppard. And I have to say, like a lot of Bengalis, I grew up reading Rabindranath Tagore. So I just guzzled Tagore, and very big influence for me individually.
तो क्या हम ये कह सकते हैं कि आपकी लाइफ में फिलॉसफी का इम्पैक्ट ज्यादा रहा है?
बहुत ही philosophy का impact from when I was small, questioning even standard things, belief in God, etc. I did start very early, and I was very lucky. My parents were traditional, completely traditional, but never was I stopped. And I've said this in my book. My father, who used to once a week go to the Kali temple in Calcutta, always, no matter how busy he was. But every now and then on the way to the temple, he would say that, I don't know if anyone exists or not, but I don't want to take a risk. And he would go off to the temple. So it was clear that it was a questioning mind. And so philosophy interested me very early. So when I went to London School of Economics to do economics, I would attend a lot of philosophy lectures. And right now, I'm actually spending quite a lot of time on moral philosophy and working on that.
So, जब आप philosophy की बात करते हैं, how does it help you to understand the reality better?
Philosophy, more than anything else, it makes you question reality. So all very fundamental things about life, the existence of other people, we take it for granted. Philosophy makes you pause and ask occasionally, every experience of everything else is happening inside your head. Is the world the way it is? And there are ancient philosophies from the Greeks. There was Pyrrho. There was Indian philosophy of Maya. All these are very early questionings of this kind. So philosophy very often won't give you an answer, but it gives you a certain calm, because it in fact makes your mind a more open mind. You realize that how little do we know. Life is full of mysteries. We don't know. We know a tiny bit. I feel that if you're looking for, I read philosophy, I think of philosophy just because of my interest in it. But I think it has a great effect. It makes you much humbler, because you realize the world is just such a mystical place. You know so little. Arrogance on either side is a foolish emotion that philosophy drives you in. And I have to say, I just love reading all kinds of philosophers. And even more than that, I love thinking of philosophy. So a topic gets into my head, then I like to spend a lot of time just thinking about it, brooding about it.
तो जैसे कि हम हिंदी में कहते हैं कि आप तो गहरा सागर हैं ज्ञान का. So in that scenario, I don't think कि हम 30-40 मिनट में ये conversation खत्म कर पाते, discussion खत्म कर पाते. I think we are up 56 minutes, and Deepak also wants to come on board. Lovely discussion with you, Dr. Basu, and I'm really hoping to see your next book soon. आप एक काम कीजिए, आप 20 books decide कीजिए, उसमें से कम एक तो आप जल्दी ही लिख लेंगे 2-3 साल में.
Thank you very much, Kavita. Very nice talking to you.
Same here, Deepak.
Thank you for the great session and sharing your experiences and thoughts with us. Thank you everyone for tuning in. You can check out Policymakers Journal on Amazon India's website and app. Happy reading.
Thank you.
Thank you.